Christianic C1 review covering Las Vegas and the world. If you haven't already, please hit the like button below and please hit the subscribe button below to keep up with everything we have going on here at C1 Review in Las Vegas and beyond. It's WrestleMania week. It's the Thursday, 2 days away until the Saturday night one of WrestleMania, Allegiant Stadium, home of the Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, there are two nights, April 19th and then Sunday, April 20th. So there are tons of pro wrestling stars in town for the WWE. Of course, there are also stars at different fan conventions from the past, from pro wrestling from 20, 30 years ago. But aside from all of these wrestling legends in town and the current WWE stars today, this WrestleMania week also brought to the town a best-selling author from the New York Times best-selling author, and WWE historian, pro wrestling historian Keith Elliot Greenberg. Mr. Greenberg met some fans at the downtown DDT Las Vegas bar and grill tonight to talk about his new book, Bigger, Better, and Badder. It's the story of how WrestleMania 3 changed the wrestling business. We had a chance to talk with Keith Elliot Greenberg about his new book, and here's what he told us.
My new book is Bigger, Better, Badder, WrestleMania 3 and the Year It All Changed. It is currently WrestleMania week in Las Vegas. There's currently something like 100,000 visitors to the city of Las Vegas. I don't believe any of this would have occurred if WrestleMania 3 in 1987 hadn't sold out an NFL stadium. To me, that was really a key moment. It was a moment when wrestling had been a fad, and now it became serious entertainment, where media conglomerates, sponsors, and licensees said this is something to invest in. I put a lot of emphasis on what it was like to play for the losing team. So it's not just about WrestleMania 3, but I spoke to people who were in other promotions and they couldn't seem to, beat this WWE juggernaut. And so Greg Gagne, whose father owned the American Wrestling Association, he's in the book. The director of the Von Erichs World Class television show is in the book. Ross Hart, Bret Hitman Hart's brother, who is the Hart family historian, is in the book. So all those people contributed a valuable perspective. Cowboy Bill Watts, the promoter, was in the book. We get a full picture of what the industry was like and how WrestleMania 3 changed it.
Mr. Greenberg also told us about what he thought about WrestleMania being this week in Las Vegas.
Las Vegas is almost a tailor-made city for WrestleMania. It is a spectacle city. It's one of these places where what you see isn't necessarily what is going on. So it's the perfect place for smoke and mirrors, and it's very suitable for professional wrestling. But I think much like, these casinos were the dream of gangsters from the Northeast, and a lot of people were very cynical as to whether it would fly in the middle of the desert. Well, that's what professional wrestling has become. You had people who had all the traits of classic carnies, and they created something so large, now the world comes to them.
Finally, on a side note, Keith Elliot Greenberg, back in 2003, was the co-author for wrestling legend Classy Freddie Blassie's book, Listen You Pencil Neck Geeks. In 2003, I had the great fortune to interview Classy Freddie Blassie prior to his passing. Keith Elliot Greenberg was the co-author for that book. You're going to get to hear that C1 interview again now at the end of this recording. I'm Christianic for C1 Review. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button below to keep up with everything we have going on here at C1 Review in Las Vegas and beyond, and I'll see you in the next one.
I'd like to welcome my guest this time. It's truly an honor, a wrestling legend in no sense and no doubt, Classy Freddie Blassie. First off, how are you doing today?
Fine. Can you hold just one second?
Sure.
Yeah, hello now.
Your book, The Legends of Wrestling, Classy Freddie Blassie, Listen You Pencil Neck Geeks, is a story of your life from growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, to your start in wrestling, to your run with the WWE. Did you think it was time to do this book, and what can fans expect from the book altogether?
What brought me together with the last part I didn't understand.
What made you decide to write this book, basically?
Oh, well, it was just approached to write the story of my life. After all, 85 years old, and I guess they figured, or I figured also, that it's about high time they start writing something because I'm getting a little bit old.
How did you come up with the catchphrase, "Listen, you pencil neck geeks"?
Well, that was when I was a teeny youngster, and I was wrestling in carnivals, and I got there a little early, and the fellow that ran the wrestling carnival, he told me, he said, why don't you go next door and take a look at the freaks? So I went next door, and there was this guy here biting heads off of chickens, off of snakes and things, and I left, and he said, well, how'd you like it? I said, I don't know, really, this guy here makes me sick. He bites the heads off of snakes and everything. He's a real pencil neck. In fact, he's a real pencil neck geek. And that's how that came about.
When you made your debut in a wrestling at a carnival, what was that like? And maybe you can go back and tell me what the days of wrestling were like back then. And your mom thought wrestling was foolishness, am I right?
Well, it's altogether different today than in that era. I mean, now there's more aerial tactics and everything. The fellows are in much better condition than we ever thought of being. Because many times I'd wrestle, get in the car and drive 300 miles, and I didn't have enough money for a room, so I'd sleep in my car. And if I needed a bite to eat, I'd get a hamburger or something. But it's a lot harder today. I'm glad I was in the early days of wrestling instead of today.
Why do you think you got over so well as a heel, as a wrestler and a manager, that by being such a bad guy during your wrestling programs that you have had death threats, been stabbed 21 times, and even been doused with acid? What are your thoughts on all that, and did you ever consider about being a good guy?
No, that was the furthest thing from my mind, because I looked out at the audience and I see nothing but idiots. Anybody that goes and cuts somebody or throws acid on them, I guarantee you, and also losing the sight of a right eye. These are things that you don't look forward to when you become a wrestler. You're thinking about getting in a ring and getting out. And all I ever thought about was getting in a ring and getting out safely, the way I got in. But it didn't happen that way.
How many legitimate injuries did you have through your career?
If I were to tell you, I wouldn't be telling you the truth. I had every rib on the right side broken, 5 on the left, 7th to the 11th thoracic vertebrae fused together. I have 2 interplanet knees, I have 1 kidney, and well, then the cuts and different things that happen in the injuries to the ring and out of the ring. I suffered as much almost out of the ring as I did in the ring due to these idiotic fans.
When you left to serve your country in World War II in the Navy, did you ever think you would return to wrestling, and how did you end up back in wrestling after the war?
Well, no, I always wanted to be a wrestler. There was no 2 ways about it. My mother, she used to call it foolishness. She said, why don't you cut out that foolishness and get a job? I said, I want to be a wrestler. She said, yeah, but you're not making no money, you're not, no expenses or nothing. I said, but I don't care, I want to be a wrestler. And many times I went hungry. And many times, for lack of sleep, like I said, I slept in my automobile. And if I want to use the men's room, I'd have to go to a service station. So things weren't all peaches and cream. But the fellas today, the traveling they do, I guarantee, I think, to me, it's a lot harder what they're doing today than what I did.
What were the days of the wrestling territories like for you in New York, Los Angeles, and Georgia?
Oh, God. You'd go into a territory like, say, New York.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I came to New York, I was a punk kid wrestling around East St. Louis, Illinois, St. Louis, Missouri, where I was from, and I wasn't doing anything. And one of the fellows said, "Why don't you go to New York?" He said, "They're looking for wrestlers." So, like a ding-a-ling, I went to New York, and I had about 5 matches, and a promoter called me on the side one time. He said, "Son," he said, "you're not qualified to wrestle these men up here. Now go somewhere and learn the trade, and then I'm sure one of these days you're going to be a top-notcher." And I thought to myself, if this old geezer just wants to get rid of me, I know what he's after. So I left New York. I went down south, and that's where I did most of my wrestling and training, down in the south. And it was rough. I mean, those Southerners down there, they played for keeps.
Tell me about your classic feud with John Tolos in the Los Angeles territory, and what are your best memories of John Tolos altogether?
Well, I had a lot of respect for John Tolos as a person, but as a wrestler, not too much. I didn't care for anyone else. As far as I was concerned, there was only one wrestler, and that was Classy Freddie Blassie. And John gave me fit after fit after fit every time I put on those tights and got in the ring with him. I knew I was going to be in for a heck of a beating, and I knew he was going to get one too. And that's the reason why the fans all turned out whenever Tolos and Blassie would meet in the ring.
Tell me about your very bloody feud with Ricky Dozan in Japan, as you made a name for yourself as the Vampire for that very violent feud, and what was it like working in Japan overall?
Well, I mean, they wanted some wrestlers for Japan, and I'd never been there, and I was a champion and everything over here, which meant not too much to the Japanese. They only had one wrestler in mind, and that was Ricky Dozan. So I went over there and I wrestled, and I had battle after battle, not only with the wrestlers, but the fans also. And they would follow me. I'd get up in the morning in the hotel, go out to the restaurant to have a bite to eat, and there might be 50 to 100 people in the lobby waiting to see me. And every step I took, they took right with me. And great wrestling fans, but they sure didn't care for Freddie Blassie. They called him the Vampire.
What was it like to wrestle at the beginning of the WWE under the first of the McMahons, Jess McMahon, then his son Vincent James McMahon, and his grandson Vincent Kennedy McMahon? And do they compare? And how did they compare? And how do you think each of them contributed to the success of the World Wrestling Entertainment altogether?
Well, Vince McMahon Jr., the promoter today, he's got more on the ball than all the other promoters put together. From the years gone by, you could accumulate them, get them all together and everything, and shake them upside down, and their brains wouldn't even rattle, because they don't have any. But I guarantee you, this man here, he's been condemned so many times, but that's something that I'll never be able to see, because time after time after time, he came to my rescue. And I'll always respect him for that, and his wife, children, and his father, Vince Sr., and just his grandfather, that was the man that gave me the advice and told me, son, you got to get more experience before you're qualified to keep wrestling with fellas like this. It's the best advice I could have gotten.
You managed Hulk Hogan in the WWF days during the early feud between Hogan and Andre when Hogan was the heel. What are your thoughts fully on Hogan, and does it amaze you to see him wrestling still today and have the popularity that he does?
Well, that's something no one can understand. I mean, here's a guy that's lost matches and everything, and hasn't given too good of interviews and what have you like. He's impressed with his own importance, which is good, but he's not as good as he thinks he is.
You also had the chance to manage Jesse Ventura during his days with the World Wrestling Entertainment. What are your thoughts fully on Jesse Ventura as a wrestler, and did you ever expect him to be the governor of Minnesota?
He was a great talker even when I was managing. He wouldn't even listen when I was telling him things to do. He had his own way of doing it, and that's the way it was going to be. And when he got elected governor of Minnesota, I was very surprised. People say, well, I should have run competition to him. I'm no politician. I'm strictly a wrestler at all times, front, center, and the end. I'll always be Classy Freddie Blassie, the wrestler, not Classy Freddie Blassie, the politician.
You got the chance to manage Muhammad Ali in the infamous boxer versus wrestler match. What was it like to work with Muhammad Ali altogether, and do you consider that one of your highlights of your career?
Muhammad Ali was one of the nicest gentlemen I've ever had the pleasure to meet. He never disputed anything I told him. When he went over to wrestle and fight Antonio Inoki, Inoki kept staying on the mat all the time, kept kicking. And he'd come back in after the end of the round, and Muhammad Ali would tell Angelo Dundee, who was his manager, that I'm going to go out and get on the mat with him. And I told him, I said, don't you dare do that. It'll be the biggest mistake in your life. What he'll do is break your leg and he'll break your arm, because boxer has no chance whatsoever with a wrestler. Whenever you have a mixed match, wrestler versus boxer, boxer versus wrestler, you can always bet your bottom dollar that the boxer's going to lose.
How did Hollywood affect your career as far as working with Andy Kaufman in the film Breakfast with Lassie, which was an underground classic in which you uttered the words, "What the hell ever happened to the human race?"
Andy was another guy. This was a fella, I came out of the ring, and I'm going down to the dressing room, and he's standing there. I said, "Hey boy, you're not allowed back here. Get out of here." And I chased him out. Next week I came back, he's there again. I said, "Hey, I ran you out last week. Get the hell out of here." And I don't care what you want, get out of here. So, as I walked down the dressing room, the fella taking care of the locker rooms and things, the showers and what have you, he said, "Mr. Blassie, you know who that is?" I said, "No." He said, "That's Andy Kaufman." I said, "Who's Andy Kaufman?" He said, "He's a comedian." I said, "He's not too funny to me." And so then I felt the following week he wasn't there. I said, well, I got rid of him once and for all. And I had to park a half a block away from the arena, the Olympic Auditorium, because there was no parking facilities left.
Okay.
So anyway, as I start walking in the car, he said, "Mr. Blassie." I thought, oh no, not again. And I said, "What do you want?" He said, "I want to talk to you." I said, "I don't want to talk to you." And he said, "Please, I want to talk." So I invited him over and took him out. We had a bite to eat, and from then on we became friends. He was one of the nicest kids I've ever had the pleasure to meet. He wanted to become Freddie Blassie of the entertainment world.
When you finished your career fully with the World Wrestling Entertainment as a wrestler and a manager, what were your thoughts from retiring from inactive ring action altogether? And was that hard for you?
Well, yes, it was quite a blow to my ego. I didn't think I was ever going to get old, and they decided to make me a manager, or I couldn't wrestle no more. None of the promoters, they'd use me, but they'd want to give me preliminary money. Well, I wasn't fit to be tied with preliminary money. I figured my value at an arena to the gate was 85% of the drawing capacity.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about how the Grand Wizard, Captain Lou Albano, and yourself started Paul Heyman's career in wrestling in many ways.
Well, Paul Heyman, this guy here, I'm telling you, he's a little weird. Now, anyway, he wanted to get involved, and he got acquainted with the Wizard. And I went downtown in Manhattan before the Madison Square Garden show, and the Wizard said, "Hey," he said, "I got a kid over here wants to sell some of your pictures." And I thought to myself, well, ready cash. I mean, I was visualizing maybe $100, $50, and so I give the kid, I forget how many pictures now offhand, could be 50 or 100 pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 weeks later, they told me, they said, "Hey, Paul Henning's looking for you." I said, "Who's Paul Henning?" He said, "That's the guy that sells those pictures." I said, "Oh, yeah." I was visualizing money, $50 or $100. And he come in and gave me $3. I said, $3? What the hell are you doing with $3? I said, "I'll beat your brains in." He says, "Well, that's all I sold." "All you sold? I thought you were going to sell pictures." And that was my first acquaintance with Paul Henning.
You are known today as a very motivational speaker for all the guys in WWE today. What kind of reaction do you get from the current World Wrestling Entertainment superstars of today when you go to a show or a WWE event, and do you still follow the current World Wrestling Entertainment product today?
Yeah. As I said before, today the wrestler has a much harder time. The aerial tactics they use and everything, the body slams and beals and out of the ring, in the ring, head of the ring post. And once in a while my wife she'll say, "Where's so-and-so?" And I say, "Well, he got hurt. He's in the hospital, or he's at home recuperating."
Mm-hmm.
People think that you can just go out and playing tiddly, but it's altogether different. And I mean, the promoter won't use you unless you can draw money. If you can't draw money, you're not worth a hill of beans.
When you watch wrestling today and you see these guys take these incredible bumps and you look back on your time, do you think today's WWE product is more entertainment than it is about the wrestling, for sure?
Well, people, that they say, well, prearrange this, prearrange that. You never had to prearrange anything for me. I did my own prearranging.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go out and I'd bust your head wide open, chew on your forehead, chew on your ear.
Mm-hmm.
I used to file my teeth, and that was legit. They put the camera right on my mouth and watch me filing the teeth. And there's no way you can get around saying that it doesn't hurt.
Mm-hmm. Finally, maybe you could give a message to your fans, and supposedly you tell some of the best Polish jokes in the world, so maybe we can get one of those as well, if possible.
Polish joke?
Yeah.
I never heard of a good Polish joke yet. They remind me of Ivan Putski. Ivan Putski. You remember Ivan Putski?
Yeah, I sure do.
Yeah. He's not worth a hill of beans. He was ridiculing me while I was doing an interview. I stopped the interview and I walked over to Ivan Putski where he was sitting with a couple of his cohorts. I says, "Get up, you no good." I can't say it on TV, otherwise it would be, or on radio, I'd be barred for life. But anyway, the guy sat there like he was glued to this chair. Didn't make one move. I said, "Get up." I said, "I'll snuff you up one nostril and pour you out the other." And I said, "When I'm finished with you, I'll stomp you to death." To this day, he still he hasn't recuperated fully from what I said. And believe me, I was in the mood to do it too, because here's the guy that, with that Putski, that dance of his and all that junk. I mean, you take that away from him and he's nothing.
And a message to your fans?
Well, just remember, there's only one Classy Freddie Blassie.
Thank you so much for your time, Classy Freddie Blassie. You take care.
You know, if you're in good health, age doesn't really matter unless you are a cheese.
Makes sense in some sense. Thank you for your time.
Well,